every few weeks, every different versions when you have the machine learning involved. So it is really a headache when we want to regulate something. Is a moving target. It changes all the time. And when, for example, if the product has been approved or licensed for entering into the market, but in a couple of weeks' time, it's already evolved into another product. How can we reassure the consumers the safety aspect when it was first licensed? So it is such a difficult task for regulators now. So as you can see, the AI Act in the EU has been launched last year, and it has developed a very comprehensive regulatory framework, as I show here in the left-hand column. So it's set out the principles and the legal framework and liability issue duties of different stakeholders. And you can see it's a fairly nice written legal framework. But when we talk to industry representative or even scholars in the EU or across the world, a lot of people are very suspicious because they were just feeling, oh, it's going to kill the AI industry in Europe. It's not facilitating innovation. But then, on the other hand, consumers or users, they would like to see more safeguard, more liability issue being addressed in the law. But the other argument is if you really set aside very stringent or rigid legal framework, industry wouldn't want to take risks, or they want to take risks elsewhere. They wouldn't come to Europe. So this is the issue that we are facing worldwide. In the UK, after Brexit, the UK government would like to adapt a more anti-precautionary thinking strategy. So basically, the EU AI Act is like a counter model for the UK government's approach. The UK government has looking into more align with a US model, which is more commercial, more market oriented model. So the UK model is basically more the wait and see. So we know that the EU framework very clear, very articulated, very well written, but the UK approach is setting out 5 principles in basic, and then it tries to use a contextual interpretation as to each individual scenario or different sectorial interpretation. So it delegates all the specific regulators as to what kind of interpretation to those AI principles needs to be defined in specific context. So it leaves the blank canvas really to government. And also, we call this is more called regulation model. So now we couldn't have just a top-down approach to regulation. The government regulators may involve 3 regulators, or up to 4 or 5 regulators at one case. We may have the regulator for ICT, information technology, and maybe involve the regulator for human rights agents, or then another one may be competition regulator, and another one may be health and medicine regulators. They may come into such a close for a specific case. So the problem would be how efficient and how coherent the interpretations of those principles are. So we will really need to figure out are they really doing their jobs properly. For the Aegis project, as we have just repeated, we know that the EU AI Act is basically based on European or Western centric model, which actually value more of the individualistic value, like individual harm, the risk to individual autonomy, individual privacy, individual data protection. So it's more focusing on the fundamental rights and fundamental rights protection and access to data. But the problem with the Western model would be there are constantly clash between individual rights. Even within the same person, there will be problem with to what extent the privacy should be safeguarded and to what extent data should be shared in order to promote public interest in research. And there will also be a problem with how do you expect or impose individuals' duties in the chain of custody. As I just mentioned before, there would be layers of different duties and liabilities within the whole life cycle of AI product. And the other thing we will also need to address is the constant tension between innovation and conservation. So obviously, conservation is a big issue we are facing now. And we noticed that when we were at the airport, there is a sign saying that there is no plastic bag carried into Tanzania. And we just reckon this is a very big presence of conservation. And when we did some shopping in Stone Hotel, and we weren't given the plastic bags. It was like all recycled Chinese bags written Chinese. So I think there's a big nice feature of the conservation thing here when we think about deployment here. But it was not really much addressed in the Western values. So when we look back into different culture, where I'm from East Asia. So we look into the communitarian model really. We look into not as much as the individualistic human right. We look into more communal duties, where we have the kind of a communal collective identity. And our identity is defined by the relation we owe to another individual or another unit. For example, my personal identity is defined by my role as employee in a company. So that would define my duty and my rights. So it's not specific on my personal data, on my privacy, on my autonomy, myself. It's more of looking at the social order, looking at the claim, the family, the company as a group. And those best interests will be defined by the group collectively. So I think there is a resonance here when we look into the model in Islamic culture. But looking back in the Confucius context, it looked for a more broader agenda or more horizontal goal for human flourishing. So we don't really focus on much of safeguarding individual rights. So for the AI system, we wouldn't advocate for individual privacy protection as much as